Hey everybody, it's Jaster here. Just giving you a quick heads up before we get into tonight's episode. That's right, you heard it here first. You done seen it in the thumbnail. We got a 2-part special coming to y'all. And that's partially on me that you guys didn't get this sooner because it has been out on Spotify. We did have an outage a couple of days ago with trying to upload stuff. We got things figured out, but getting things rolling here on the YouTube side of things as well. Now, that being said, be anticipating part 2 here soon. We already got it filmed up in the bag. We just got to get it edited and out. And we appreciate you guys and all the patience that y'all have shown us. And thanks for commenting, liking, and subscribing on the videos. It means a whole lot. So, let me not waste any more time. Let's get into possibly one of my other most favorite American phenomenon, the Dogman. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to the almost famous sideshow known as KoR After Hours, only available after 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at our riverboat down on the water here. I'd like to introduce you guys to the crew we got going on tonight. We got Kazari Iwakura. Hey. We got Kaiden Orelin.
Hello.
And we got ourselves a wonderful show planned for y'all tonight. Now, we say that, but we're recording at like 4:30 in the afternoon, you know what I'm saying? But
listen, we're already in the night mindset.
And thus the illusion is broken.
The kayfabe ruined, KoR Live canceled forever, let's all go home, fuck, quit our job.
KoR Live exposed.
We were already running a speakeasy off of a riverboat on the Mississippi River. I don't know what to tell y'all. Kayfabe. Alright, so, we got ourselves...
I want to say... I'm in a really great mindset for this. It's been really rainy and gloomy today, and that's just always the perfect kind of weather for talking about any kind of cryptids, if you ask me.
Absolutely. It's
100%.
Not great for your mind, but it's great for the mood.
It's great for the mood, yeah. It's also always more comfy inside the house during that kind of weather. That just kind of goes.
True.
So really quickly before we hop on the saddle and get off to the races here, we all really want to give a quick shout out to Squatchable.com. We found out literally right before we started recording that they wrote an article about the 5th episode of our Bigfoot iceberg on YouTube, and we're over the moon about it. It's always interesting to see that our different aspects of our project are reaching the audiences they're finding, and we're thrilled. We're stoked that that people are listening to us and spreading the word. And we could not be more happy. So Squatchable.com, if you're listening to this, we greatly appreciate it. And if you're not, well, thanks anyways. But also, I won't be rude.
No. So for anybody, now I think there is some overlap here with the Dogman community and the Bigfoot community, let's be honest. So
absolutely.
For anybody that is interested in any of the up-to-date Bigfoot content out there, you can just go Squatchable, which is like Squatch, and then able, slap them words together, .com. You're good to go. What they do is they gather all of the day-to-day Bigfoot posts, videos, all that kind of stuff, and they put it all in one spot, which is great. I haven't seen anything quite like that before. And they also got a place where you can submit your encounters. You never know. Cool. Sign up for a newsletter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you like what you're hearing and you want to learn more about one of our most favorite cryptid subjects, give them a shout out. Thank you. And let's get on in with it here. So, the Michigan Dogman is what most people know about. It's the most common thing here.
So, this is an episode I've been wanting to do for a long time because Jaster loves his mountain giants. And while we both have a shared passion for Dogman, there's our specific niches in cryptozoology that we really are deeply passionate about and research more than anything else. And for me, this is something that's kind of captured my imagination in the last 5 or 6 years is the Dogman. Now, the story of the Dogman is a little harder to follow, mainly because it's only been discussed amongst cryptozoology enthusiasts in any greater numbers in only recent years, and we don't have quite as much details about behaviors or anything like that we've been able to compile between reports and the way that we do about, say, Sasquatch in terms of like behaviors and habitation and all that stuff. We know a couple of details, but these creatures are a lot more enigmatic, elusive, and also more dangerous. Now, you may be asking, well, what the fuck's a dogman? Well, I'm glad you asked. Dogman is the term used to refer to bipedal canine-like cryptids. Oftentimes, they're as big or sometimes even bigger than your average Sasquatch. They're known for their well, much like Sasquatch, their traits vary, but typically they are a bipedal canine cryptids. And I know I'm kind of repeating myself here, but like the thing about dogmen is that they are just as varied as squatches are, because we've talked about all the different kinds of like subspecies of squatches and stuff like that. And I'm sorry, I didn't have this in our notes.
No,
Jaster.
I guess if I wanted to kind of add into it a little bit to kind of get it wrapped around layman's terms, so, and this is kind of something where we're going to get into it a little bit later. You take your basic idea of a European werewolf, right?
Yes, there we go. That's the best point of reference.
So you take a European werewolf in the middle of a full moon, okay? You stick him in that form 24/7, all right? You juice him. You make him like 6 to 10 feet tall, ripped, okay? And then you release him into the American countryside for some reason instead of the European area. Who knows? But this has been one of my favorite subspecies of cryptids to hear about, mostly because it's one of the only ones you really hear about in my area of the woods here in Kentucky. You get Bigfoot encounters, but you get dogman encounters around here. Now, like out in Appalachia, you get all kinds of weird shit.
Yeah, Appalachia is probably the weirdness epicenter of the United States.
It is known for high strangeness.
There is all sorts of weird bullshit out there. I mean, you got goatmen, dogmen, Bigfoot. And that's not even getting into the ghosts and the demons and the aliens and the who's-its and the what's-its and
the feral people that live out there. That's before you even get into weird shit like that.
And that's before you even get into the actual people who live out there too. So
right.
It's a very interesting area of the country.
Yeah.
Not to disparage my own people, but we know what we is, you know what I'm saying? So.
Hold on. I'm getting a phone call. Give me a moment. What the fuck?
Alright. Here, I'll go ahead and kind of get into the structure of what we got going on here while Kaz is away. So, what we're planning on doing here is we got two people that like to research cryptids. We got myself and we got Kaz. And then we got Kaiden, who in our group is known as the straight man. You know what I'm saying? It's hard to convince him of a lot of things that aren't typically rational.
Which is really funny considering that I am a Christian and believe in God who cannot be, proven to exist.
It's a wild time. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So when it comes down to investigating these kind of things, we like to talk to Kaiden about what's going on in some of these stories because, some of them get us excited because they get so crazy or because there's so many outlandish claims going on in said report that sometimes we let the proverbial cart get before the horse here. So, like, Kaiden likes to kind of rationally think about some of these situations on the face of it. We kind of get wrapped up in the stories. I love a good story. So, we like to bring Kaiden along to kind of be the dose of realism here in the panel. Now, do you have any questions off the cuff about the Dogman?
Not really off the cuff per se, because you guys have talked about Dogman to me quite a bit. Not just, outside of the podcast, but also on the podcast too. I know that we've had a couple episodes where we've, touched on it and everything. So,
what's your general thoughts so far?
I'm not entirely sure what to really make of it. I like I said, like the supernatural aspects of the Dogman, like the stuff where it's like apparently induces nightmares in people and shit. I don't
Okay,
believe
I'm
in.
back. Sorry, some job hunt related stuff popped up. One
Ooh.
of yeah, I usually try to make sure I don't get phone calls and stuff, but this is sometimes you just best efforts. All right, so what do you
Eh,
guys talk about in the like 1 or 2 minutes that I was away?
I was trying to get kind of what we were going, why we got the panel set up the way we do. Try and get Kaiden's official kind of look at the Dogman down first before we kind of get into the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
it's the main thing, like the supernatural elements that are associated with him. I still skeptical on, but and as far as it itself, I don't know whether I would believe in it or not. It seems like with at least with Bigfoot, I can believe there's a monkey out there we just haven't seen.
That's fair. Dogman asks a lot more of you because it's like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
It
what do
seems
you?
intelligent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're both intelligent, but like,
I get it, but like in a way that's almost wicked. Like
yeah,
there's a
Yeah,
commonality of almost pure bad intent.
yeah. It seems like Dogman is more of a malevolent force than just like
it
a monkey.
is.
Right. And like
So
I want to get into one of my favorite parts of the whole Dogman phenomenon. It's one of my favorite parts of the Bigfoot phenomenon too.
mhm.
But it works in similar ways, but it doesn't work exactly the same way in both subjects. Now, let's go ahead and start at the beginning, I guess.
All right, so, gosh, so we decided that we would open up after our general overview of Dogman. We would talk about a general definition. We would talk about a sighting that we had picked out. That kind of hits all the usual tropes that are found in these encounters. And I'll go a bit more into detail about each of these, oddities or quirks or behaviors and stuff like that are seen in this. So this is an article in the Midland Daily News that we picked out that was written by Angela Molka 2 years ago on October 5th, 2022. It is about a truck driver named Joe Barger, age 59, formerly of who has 6 years of military service under his belt, who encountered a dogman in the Manistee National Forest in 2017. Now, for the longest time, the dogman was known as the Michigan Dogman because the good majority of reports that happen in this part of the country, Michigan, Wisconsin, and I think one or two other states, but majority of it is Michigan. And there's, just from speaking to friends I know who have traveled and camped in that area, Michigan has some of the densest woods in the entire country.
It's
And
wicked, I will attest.
it's insane. And there are some people in the Dogman community call this the Dogman supercell. It's not a term that's taken off yet, but it's generally agreed upon this is where the majority of them are. So, Joe Barger was transporting a 43,000-pound load of paper from a paper mill through the forest, through the national forest here on his typical route. He realized that his truck had an air leak, so he pulls over on the side of the road and stops to take a look and finds an air leak in the back brake chamber on the trailer. So he gets his tools out and he gets under the trailer and he gets to working on fixing it. It's a pretty quick repair. It only took about 5 minutes, but the thing is, the whole time he was doing it, he had a bad feeling. Yeah, this is already, boop, we're already hitting one of the tropes. So, in comparison to Sasquatch presence, Dogman presence unnerves people, genuinely.
Universally.
Yeah, universally. Squatch sometimes sets off his fight or flight response in people. Dogman always does. Just having one in the area will set people's hairs on end. You have the same unnatural quiet that appears in the wilderness when a Squatch is nearby. It happens with Dogman as well. Barge reports hearing a vocalization that wasn't natural. This is his words. It wasn't a sound I had ever heard before. I was looking around and saw some shadowing in the woodline, but there was plenty of light to see. It was nowhere near getting dark yet. I was in bear country, so I perceived the shadowing to be a black bear at the time. Obviously, upon realizing, hey, there might be a bear nearby, he got back into his truck. Now, thankfully, his hair had been fixed and it was good to go. It held, and so, alright. So, the woods gave him a bad feeling, but he kept driving. He checked his mirror. There's no other traffic on the 2-lane road he's on. But then, as he's going up a hill, he checks his right side mirror, and he sees that his mirror is darker than it should be. There, quote him, "There was a wolf head the size of my window, and my windows were down. He was trotting along next to me, and I was going about 20 to 25 miles per hour at that point, and he was stooping down on 2 legs, looking down inside of my cabin. I'm at 9 feet tall in my seat. His hands were coming up, scratching my windowsill. On my door handle, I could hear his claws. Time slowed down. I thought I was in, like, an alternate reality or something, because a creature like this doesn't exist in reality I've ever known of. I have heard of Bigfoot, and I know this to be something that's talked about. This is a whole different thing altogether. Bigfoot has nothing on Dogman. It has a lot of sharp teeth, and the teeth on this thing were like brilliant white. 3-inch long fangs, bottom and top, pure black pointed ears. It had yellow eyes with human-like hands, probably 14 inches across. It was at least 10 feet tall from how it was stooping into my cabin. His yellow eyes were darting all over the place and looking at me. Alright, so we're going to put a pin in that again. We're going to stop here. And already we've hit a couple common descriptors. Usually they have pointy ears, really big teeth. The human-like hands is something especially that's very common. While there is a bit of variety in the appearance of dogmen, generally one of the things that unsettles people the most about them is that even though these things are mostly beast-like, their eyes and their hands have this human quality to them that unnerves a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to report he could hear his claws on the handle of the door. This is the part that always has shook me up about these things. These guys know how to use doors, and if they see somebody inside, they will go to a door and try to use it and get in, which bothers me immensely, because Squatch, while they will definitely be curious about homesteads or vehicles, and they might say pound on walls, throw rocks, something like that, it's very rare Squatches ever try to get in, right, Jaster?
It does happen, though.
It does happen, but it's very rare. And
it's like they don't know how to turn a knob or something. It's like there's no... It's like they know and look and see that we use it to open a door, but they don't understand how the mechanism
But also,
works.
like, generally they don't have the desire to get into our structures.
If they do, it's through a window.
It's through a window. It's always through a window, and generally it's to get at someone that pissed them off, right?
Or
But,
something like maybe a kid, and they're kind of enamored by a child. I've heard that a few times.
That's pretty
And
common.
they'll try and
but,
get at the kid.
Squatches don't generally just go around trying to get into houses or vehicles. I have read a lot of reports where people would come home in areas where there are dogman activity, and they would have all these scratches on their doors, particularly around the doorknobs. Sometimes they would come home and find the door ajar. There will be objects missing and scratches on cabinets and floors, and sometimes even smells of dog urine. Pretty scary stuff, honestly. Just the idea of a home invader is just uncomfortable, but it being a big pissed off wolf man, that's oof.
There's something different about that for sure. There's a predatory quality, because it's, I mean, monkeys can be predatory, but they're omnivorous at heart, what I mean? And, like, I don't know, I guess for people, when you talk about a Bigfoot versus a Dogman, at least there's some more human commonalities with the Bigfoot you're looking at than the Dogman you're looking at, because you know you can't communicate with that thing, or you can at least communicate in some subliminal text to the big monkey thing in the woods over here staring at me that I don't mean it any harm, and it might figure it out, because we're in the same species. No, a lot of people are very thankful that they have guns when they have a gun when this thing's around. Like,
and that actually is going to come up here if you let me continue. So, going back to Barger's report, how this creature looked was mad and determined to get to me. He was sneering. He wasn't making any noises vocally, but the looks he was giving me and the intelligence in his eyes was telling me, I'm here to get you and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm putting a pin in it right there again. Because this is a common feeling people get when they encounter dogmen. Especially in encounters this close. Dogmen usually have this very angry look to them, and they're very threatening, and people always feel like they're intentionally trying to get at them. And this is a feeling I have read a lot in reports. My assumption is that dogmen are way more territorial than squatches are. Squatches will let people know that you have wandered in their territory, and they will start making efforts to drive you out.
But they tend to be in pairs.
It tends to be in much more passive ways, right? And sometimes they might just... But, like, dogmen will chase people out of areas. They will do bluff charges to scare people. Sometimes they will chase people for certain distances before leaving them alone. I will say this right now. I have never heard of people getting attacked. I can count on the amount of my hands the amount of times I have heard of people getting attacked. But I should also mention and getting away. And I can literally think of only one encounter that's like that. And I'm not going to get into that in this episode. Maybe if we return to the topic. Because I don't have the exact encounter on hand. I have it saved in my stash of, like, significant ones. But, like, I would have to go listen through hours of material on a certain podcast to go dig it out and get all the facts.
No, that's fair.
I have Sorry.
Yeah, what's up?
Just a slight question, though, with these things. Considering, like, a lot of the stories I seem to hear are, like, people, like, encountering these things while driving down the road and all that stuff. If the dogman is, like, as aggressive as these stories make it out to be, how did the roads get built without them being encountered, and how do they... And why is it that we never hear from, like, road crews that are out there maintaining these roads that, you know...
About that, I have actually heard a couple of stories from guys who have worked on road crews or road projects that have run into these things.
Well, then, by all means.
Again, I don't have this one on hand, but I do have it in my stash. I'll get back to this one. There was this encounter a guy had. It was somewhere out in the deserts in the southwest. He was coming home from working on a job site, and he had his dog in the truck with him, and a dogman began to run at him from out of the desert as he was leaving a job site, and like it was a really fucking high speed chase too. I should mention these things can run really goddamn fast. I have heard encounters of where people were going down roads and these things started paralleling them, and they sped up out of fear, going 50, 60, sometimes 70 miles per hour, and these things would keep pace with them no problem.
Okay. Yeah, because like I said, it just like every story I've heard of like dogman encounters have been like, you know, just random.
It's always near roads. That's
It's
the two most common sites for dogman encounters is people see them from their vehicles while they're on the road, or they will see them near graveyards or lakes.
Right, and it was just like I said, it's like with these things being, you know, that aggressive, you know, like why aren't there more road crews? It seems that are encountering these things. But if you have the stories, then we'll just have to. It just like I said, I never heard any of the stories from road crew people. So,
and I'll get into why people won't talk about dogmen in a moment here. Hold on to that thought, okay? So, all right. So Barger mentions he thought about rolling up his window, but he decided to focus on keeping the truck on the road, and that's when he remembered he had his handgun. Old boy had a Colt 45 strapped to his waist, and he takes it out and takes 2 shots at the creature. He instantly went down, Barger said. I was looking at him as he was sliding into the weeds. I was at almost point-blank range, so I'm pretty sure I got him through the eye orbit. His head was huge. Everything on the animal was black except his teeth and his eyes. I was really panicked, but it's the scaredest I've ever been in my life. So Barger assumed the creature was dead, wanted to turn around and check on the carnage to make sure he, wasn't going crazy. Reasonable enough. So about a mile up the road, he finds a spot and he turns around. As he's coming back down the hill, at most 5 minutes after shooting it, the body was gone. In its place was a jeep and 2 people. Barger said he was concerned about people being somewhere potentially dangerous, so he stopped to talk to them. The 2 people in this jeep, quote him, they give me a story that they were watching a few bears fighting each other. I was worried about them being outside with what had just happened, but I didn't want to let them know what I had just done, so I left. Barger thinks because the other people claim to have seen 2 bears that maybe there could be more dogmen in the area besides the one he shot. I was really in shock for a good while. I was still driving the truck, and I didn't even know how I got back. I shouldn't have been driving it in this state, but I was going to stay around a park anywhere near there. It was the most terrifying thing I think anybody could go through. Worse than even a combat situation, because at least you know what you're dealing with there. Now here's the important part, and this is something I'm gonna talk about here. Barger had nightmares for 6 months to a year on and off. The nightmares got less prevalent as time went on, and he doesn't deal with them anymore. This is extremely common in Dogman encounters, and it's something that fascinates me because this doesn't happen with Sasquatch reports. People will develop a form of PTSD after encountering these things, and they will have recurring nightmares. They, I'm talking like salt of the earth woodsmen who love going out hunting and stuff will just stop going into the woods altogether. They won't be able to go outside without taking a gun with them, and even then, they really don't want to stray far from the light. This messes people up psychologically, and that's part of the reason it's one of the reasons I feel like people don't talk about this as much, because it scares the dickens out of them.
I think it's such a cognitive dissonance moment.
Maybe. I mean, honestly, because Bigfoot is strange, but you mentioned there's that human element to it that makes it less frightening, I guess, to an extent. It's certainly bizarre, but it's somewhat familiar, and we can see ourselves in it. But with Dogman, that's not the case. And I think...
Right. I'd be asking myself, am I tripping right now? Trying to look at it?
And I don't want to immediately go back to this, but, one of the biggest problems humanity faced for a long time in its early development was packs of wolves. Wolves were a big problem in Europe for many centuries. Getting attacked by a pack of wolves while you were traveling was a huge risk. And there's a part of me that wonders if we have a genetic memory of that, seeing these things taps into and awakens a fear in us. And this is before we get into, the other stuff infrasound and stuff like that. Because guess what? That comes up with Dogman too. But I'm not talking about infrasound today. We're just having a general overview. I genuinely wonder if that's part of it. I think more than anything, it's shock. Honestly, it's shock and cognitive dissonance. Because Bigfoot, if you want to be just really generic, it's just a big ape, right? It's a big ape, but it walks like a person. And I feel like people are more equipped to handle that than seeing a big pissed off werewolf looking thing, Something that people think is fantasy, is only in movies or video games or whatever, But then suddenly, you're accosted by a Dogman, and now you have to just deal with the psychological fallout of that.
And I don't think silver works on these things, do they?
No. The musculature problem pops up with these guys. To call back to when we talked about Bigfoot, there are plenty of cases where people shoot at Dogmen, but pretty much unless they land a shot directly on their face, these things more or less shrug them off. And I think, it's the same as a moose. Their muscles are so big and so dense that unless you have extremely high caliber rounds, shooting them, between all the fur that they have on them and all the muscles, it just isn't going to do anything. And this is an observed phenomenon that happens with, real animals that we do know about. So, it's not too much of a logical stretch to take it to these other big, fantastical, undocumented animals.
Mm-hmm.
So, going back to the report. This is when it gets a little wacky, I will admit. And I will discuss this element. I wholeheartedly believe this man and what he went through, but at the same time, also, this is an element that doesn't pop up often. And when it does, how it plays into things varies wildly. Additionally, Barger claims the federal government is keeping the existence of the Dogman quiet. Now, we've all sat around and generally agreed that the government probably knows about Bigfoot, especially now that we've had congressional hearings about UFOs and them studying them.
Right.
And, we hit upon our theory, the national parks want to keep things quiet so that it doesn't disrupt business and, doesn't disrupt industry and stuff like that. After I got better from the nightmares, I had a family member tell me I should get this out to the public. So I talked to one podcaster that's popular in the crypto space and didn't want to be there publicly, so he took notes and narrated my story about 4 years ago. 3 months later, Barger said he was detained at a scale house by state police to wait for federal authorities. When they first showed up, they were very intimidating and angry. I didn't know what was going on. They said, "You killed one of our assets, and this is how things are going to go down." I'm going to pause it right here. Generally, when I hear about the federal government getting involved with dogmen, I've never heard them referred to as assets, ever. Generally,
No.
when I do hear about the feds getting involved, they treat them like problem animals. They get a kill team out there, and they get it handled, and they tell the person that, who had a problem with it to just never mention it again, and then they leave. It's very strange to me that they referred to it as government property, because at least in my mind, these things are wild animals, and I feel like trying to use something like that as a military asset is wildly impractical. It reminds me of in Jurassic World when Homeboy walks up to Chris Pratt and he was like, these velociraptors are great. What if they were, trained for military exercises? And Chris Pratt looks him in the eyes and goes, "Are you fucking stupid?"
Man.
So that does cause me to wonder, though, is there maybe that, these things different from, like, the other depictions of the Dogman? Because I know that's, like, people talked about it for, like, Native Americans dealing with these things. Obviously,
there are quite a few Native American cultures that have mentioned creatures like this. For instance, the Shawnee told French explorers in Louisiana about these things, and the French explorers began calling them loup-garou. So they're here. They've definitely been here for a while, and it's why I find this bit of this story so odd in comparison.
Right. So it might be that, now,
I don't know. Maybe it was more. Maybe they call it an asset more in the terms that this is something that they were keeping track of and were planning to handle themselves, and then a civilian stumbled upon it, and then they had to, keep it quiet. I don't know. But like there are sightings of military kill teams going in to handle these things and then extracting the bodies. So make of that what you will.
Which has happened with Bigfoot. Rarely. But it's always been like problem pods or groups of them in the stories that I've heard.
Yeah. So, going back to the encounter, this was their property. Barger knew the only thing he killed in the last year was the creature. This was their property, and they were mad that I killed it, and they were trying to get me to stop talking about it. They probably knew who I was from the narration story. In the video, Barger said the federal authorities threatened him, confiscated his gun, and shut his bank account off for some time. "I stopped talking about it until recently," he said. "This is probably another tool in their toolbox for military operations sometime. If they don't keep it under wraps, it won't be a useful tool for them anymore." And so that's where Barger's encounter ends. And then the article has a note about one of the earliest encounters of a dogman in Michigan happening in 1887. When two lumberjacks saw a creature they described as having a man's body and a dog's head. According to legend, the dogman appears to humans in a 10-year cycle that falls on years ending in the number 7, according to the Michigan History Center. And that's the end of that article. So we've kind of set the mood for the episode going forward, and I've earmarked a couple of common details that pop up in these stories. The only real oddity in that story in particular is the bit about the government involvement and them telling him to keep it quiet. The only time I've heard details like that in cryptid encounters is specifically when military servicemen, while in service, have encounters with cryptids, be it Sasquatch, or anything like that, and they will get detained, and superior officers will ask them what they saw, and they will basically browbeat them into saying, "I didn't see anything, sir," and then they will release them from service and then put them on a ask nowhere basis, kind of a punishment. Or, if they immediately comply, they will send them somewhere else and give them a somewhat cushy, place out of the way. I've never heard of this happening with civilians before, and it's a strange kerfuffle to this particular story that I can't really wrap my head around. But other than that, pretty textbook case of a Dogman encounter. This one, so... Now, when we're talking... Now, why are Dogmen not talked about as much? I kind of already remarked upon it. I think it's fear, but more importantly, Dogman has the stigma that Bigfoot used to have. Bigfoot, at least socially, has become a lot more acceptable in our culture in the last 20 years. There was a time in the late 90s, early 2000s, and any time before that where if you said, "Hey, I saw an ape man," it would massively discredit you. You could lose your job. People might stop talking to you. But nowadays, if you come out and say, "Hey, I saw an ape man," people will be like, "Oh, did you? Tell us about it." And, you might get some light teasing, but you're not going to lose your job over it. But now Dogman occupies that spot. It also doesn't help that, at least in my experience, so as somebody who's been reading about Dogmen for a good 10 or 12 years at this point, information was really scarce a decade ago. There was really only one or two sources of information for this. There was Linda Godfrey, who is a journalist who originally started out investigating the Beast of Bray Road, which we'll get to in a moment, before expanding her, research out into Dogman encounters in general. And then there was also the Dogman Encounters podcast website, which has a small suppository of its own. Now, in that time, a lot of other research groups have popped up, and a lot more people are starting to get together and talk about it. But it's probably going to be another decade or two before Dogman is accepted as Bigfoot, maybe even longer. Just because, again, the idea of Dogman is so fantastical and ridiculous when you really sit down and think about it.
Yeah. Well, also, too, one thing that sort of helped Bigfoot out, at least a little bit, is that you do have, photographs or footprints or something like that show something.
Bigfoot has better publicity. Yeah.
Yeah, with Dogman, I mean, all I can really see is, people, artists' renditions of what it might look like.
Bigfoot has the smoking gun of the Patterson-Gimlin film, a piece of evidence that has been scrutinized constantly by experts from all kinds of fields over the decades, and nobody has been able to debunk it yet. Yeah. There are the footprint casts that people will do. There are plenty of prominent, well-known stories. I mean, for Pete's sake, at one point, President Roosevelt, at least we're pretty sure it was President Teddy Roosevelt, encountered one. It's very ingrained in folklore. However, Dogman doesn't have that. There are a lot of alleged photos, but literally every single one of them is fake. There is a pinned post in the Dogman subreddit that has links to every single alleged Dogman photo and debunks all of them. And unfortunately, all there is right now is eyewitness accounts and artist renditions, and I don't think people will start to take it seriously until there's more tangible proof. Photographs, recordings,
not even
a body.
Not even just proof, but evidence, really, because, I mean, like I said, it's like everything that's been talked about it so far has just been, people recounting what they saw.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, it's like they're obviously in a high state of fear and all that stuff.
Yes, exactly.
And, a lot of these attacks seem to happen, or encounters seem to happen at night, which people are afraid of the dark. Sometimes they see things that, trick the mind.
The more well-known ones happen at night, but I have heard plenty of, broad daylight sightings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just eyewitness reports will only get you so far. It's just a basic principle. Eyewitness
Mm-hmm.
reports are a good baseline for any investigation. I grew up in the house of having a family member who is a police officer, and I've learned a lot about police investigative methods that way, and forensics and stuff like that. And eyewitness reports are usually a foundation. It gives you an idea of what you're looking for and gives you a direction to go in, but it's not solid, hard evidence. It's something that it it's something you start off with, and then you also use it in conjunction with other things you find to finally establish this is what happened. And again, Bigfoot has that body of evidence with the hairs and the
Mm-hmm.
castings and all that, and the photographs and the footage, and Dogman doesn't have that, and until it does, I don't think people will take it seriously, and it makes me sad, because I want people to be less afraid, both in terms of coming out about this. Um, I'm not saying like, oh, well, we should go out in the woods and hug Dogman. Absolutely not. I think this is a dangerous animal. I think people should keep their distance from it. Um, but
I think I've said it before. If my taxpayer dollars are going to military kill teams to hunt cryptids,
Mhm.
I'm definitely cool with the Dogman being on that list.
yeah, no, 100%.
I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I
If it's real, if it's out there and they're sending dudes out there, hell yeah. Get them another round of ammo on me, please. You know what I mean?
I haven't encountered a Dogman before, but like waking up to see something staring in your, something big and monstrous staring in your window is a common nightmare I've had for the longest
That's
time.
hard enough.
Um,
You know,
and then like actually having these things do that, and then you have that recurring nightmare. God, I couldn't fucking deal with it.
Well, that could just be it. It's like, are we not sure that some of those encounters aren't actually just like those really
Vivid
crystal clear-
nightmares?
Yeah, the vivid nightmares that you have.
I don't think so, because a lot of these people usually are able, because here's the thing, right? When people recount dreams, details often get lost and fuzzy and stuff. But I've heard
Right.
countless examples of people who can tell their encounters detail for detail over and over, again and again and
Mhm.
again and again. So like, it's definitely happening to people. It's real. And I think the best example of that is getting into the more prominent and well-known cases. And there's two of them, which isn't a lot in comparison to the vast library of famous Bigfoot encounters, like, say, Ape Canyon, Bluff Creek,
the Sierra Camp tapes.
Sierra Camp, stuff like that. But these two are prominent enough that we can at least talk about them. I've already mentioned it, so we'll start here. We're going to talk about the Beast of Bray Road. The Beast of Bray Road is basically the beginning of the modern Dogman phenomenon. Originally, people thought it was just this one cryptid in this one location, but as time has gone on, people have encountered more similar entities in other locations, which is when it was broadened to the Michigan Dogman, and then people started seeing it outside of Michigan, and it just became Dogman. So it's been under evolution, which is somewhat interesting. So we have with us an article from Milwaukee Magazine, posted October 30th, 2020. This is talking about one of the earliest known encounters with the entity known as the Beast of Bray Road, and it goes also into detail about the legend of the beast in general. We're going to read the encounter in this article, and then I'm going to talk about the general history of the Beast of Bray Road and all that good stuff. So, reading from the article here. Mark Shackleman arrived at St. Coletta School for Exceptional Children a little before midnight. He carried his flashlight on his belt. As the night watchman for the school, he walked these grounds every night. The school is located outside a former Franciscan convent outside Jefferson, and the grounds cover several buildings, an orchard, and wide open fields where several old Native American burial mounds have been preserved. The year was 1936. Shackleman was in his 30s, a husband and father, working the uneventful job for a paycheck to support his family. In rural Jefferson, there wasn't much to worry about, save the possibility of a burglar or some teenagers playing a prank. That night, as he was crossing the fields, he saw a shadow. He squinted to see what it was. A hunched form was on all fours, digging into one of the mounds. From the canine way it dug, it could have been a dog, or maybe a wolf, but even from far away, Shackleman could see that the thing was far too big for that. Suddenly it looked at him, and then it stood up. The sleek, hairy body unfurled to over 6 feet tall. It had a shaggy canine face, but beneath the thick fur, the muscular body of a man. A low growl echoed across the field. He smelled rotting meat. And we're going to put a pin in it right there. So, we've talked about Squatch Stink before. Dogmen, not always. This isn't something I would say is consistent enough to be a signature trait of them, but it's definitely something that is associated with them, is they don't smell good. More often, the most common scents I've heard described are rotting meat and dog urine, and specifically dog urine.
I will add, as somebody who's lived around taxidermy and large game animals and hunting and fishing my whole life, predators do have a distinctly terrible smell. Like, living and feeding off of nothing but dying corpses and stuff like that. It's kind of like being a carrion animal. You're not going to smell good ever. You know what I mean?
It also seems that, like, not smelling good seems to be a common trait among some cryptids. I mean, heck, there's been several species of Bigfoot that you guys have talked about that seem to have a smell to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like the skunk ape is apparently hilariously bad smelling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, live in a swamp your whole life.
Got
No
that swamp
deodorant.
ass, Is this what...
Dang.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Squatch, get him out there, bro.
Get out there, Dr. Squatch. Get that man that shampoo. Come on.
Yeah.
So, back to the one thing I do want to hear too. I don't know if you were wanting to get up on this, but it's one of my favorite fun facts about this story. When the lady that they had beginning the investigation on the Beast of Bray Road back in the 70s or something.
Hang on.
80s?
I'm almost done with the saying, then we can talk about Linda Godfrey.
Okay.
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 I
do have a fun
So
fact.
picking up from he smelled rotting meat, his heart was beating fast, and trying to control his breath, Shackleman stepped back. With sudden violence, the thing turned and ran off in the trees and was gone. The next night, Shackleman returned to St. Coletta for his usual rounds. As he walked the fields, he saw the shadow again, digging into the same mound as the night before. This time, he gripped his flashlight tight, ready to run or swing if need be. Again, it stood up, but this time it opened its mouth. Shackleman saw fangs hanging down from his teeth, and its lips pulled back in a snarl. It growled at him. He didn't move, and again the creature turned and left. He never saw it again, but the horrendous growl stuck in his mind for years afterwards. Okay. Now
I'm honestly just gonna say this sounds just a lot like a story someone came up. Some of the details. Just
Oh yes, because it's
way
how
too-
old it is and the way it's being told. Absolutely,
Mhm.
It's been shaped by folklore, 100%.
Yeah,
So Jaster wanted to bring up Linda Godfrey. So in the late, so there were a couple flaps of sightings of the Beast of Bray Road, and as you might imagine, the reason why it's called the Beast of Bray Road is because it's seen on and around Bray Road. Well, where is Bray Road? What is Bray Road?
It's a rural area in Michigan. Isn't it?
No, it's actually in Wisconsin, believe it or not, which is interesting because Michigan is more associated with the Dogman than Wisconsin, which is very strange. So Bray Road is a road in the city Elkhorn in Walworth County in Wisconsin, and it's a pretty lengthy road. It's a rural farm road that runs past a lot of farm property, open fields, stuff like that. A lot of it's private property. There was a flap of sightings in the 80s and 1990s, and that prompted a local newspaper, the Walworth County Week, to assign reporter Linda Godfrey to cover the story. And Linda Godfrey is an important figure in the field of Dogman because originally she was investigating the story for the magazine, but she took a personal interest in it and began researching things on her own and writing books about it and stuff like that. Linda's pretty awesome. Unfortunately, she passed away 2 years ago at the age of 71. But her blog is still up for you to read. You can find it at just lindagodfrey.com. She has posted tons of sightings of the Dogman, but also just other oddities she's found in her research. She's published plenty of books. She's been in documentaries. Like, she's about as legit as it can get when it comes to Dogman researchers.
She's kind of the David Paulides of the Bigfoot world when it comes to Dogman.
Yeah, exactly. It's 100%.
Now, like I said, one of my favorite things about her, and this is kind of like in the beginning of everything, when she got sent down there, she went up to the police department, right? Like, hey, I'm working with the paper. We've been hearing a lot of sightings about this Wolfman thing. You got anything on that? And apparently the good old boy deputy opens up the filing cabinet and hands her a file that says werewolves.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, that would be a wild thing for me to experience.
Yeah.
Like, whoa.
Because I feel like if you
Okay.
walked into any other precinct and you said, "Hey, I've been here. I'm investigating this story about this big animal," they would probably either laugh you out of the building or go, "We don't want to talk about it." The fact that old boy just turned around, opened a filing cabinet, and then picked out this big old manila folder and just handed it over to her, insane.
Yeah, they had so many accounts that they had, like, they were a police force that did answer calls consistently.
Yeah,
So,
because
like,
it eventually gets to a point where you can't ignore it anymore.
right, they wanted to at least have police presence out there so that way everybody would at least be like, man, at least they're doing their jobs. You know what I mean? Like, send somebody out there. But apparently, like, some police people might have, I think some of them might have seen it. I know, like, we were trying to find police reports of Dogman sightings, and that's kind of a scarce thing to come by. That's not so hard to find in Bigfoot land. Which I don't know. You hear of fire rescue, you hear of military people coming forward, you hear of police people coming forward all the time with Bigfoot.
I've heard a couple of police encounters with Dogman myself. So
I only really heard them in a couple of bigger podcasts. Not very often.
My go-to podcast for listening to Dogman stuff is Dogman Encounters Radio. And anytime I listen to an episode with an eyewitness I find particularly trustworthy, such as someone with military, law enforcement experience, stuff like that, I bookmarked that one. And
Oh, same. I love it whenever, like, Forestry Service talks about Bigfoot stuff.
I have a whole folder of episodes that I have bookmarked because I found them significant. I think my favorite one I've ever heard that scared the crap out of me is this retired military veteran who takes hikes and stuff like that to help his PTSD. Goes camping in nature and stuff like that. He had set up camp one night and he saw this Dogman just outside the light of his campfire. So old boy gets his knife out and turns his back to the fire, and for the rest of the night this Dogman will kind of poked at the edges of his campsite and was constantly trying to get the jump on him, and he literally didn't sleep a wink that entire night, and it didn't leave him alone until morning.
Not great.
Yeah, it's scary stuff.
I do wonder, now, like, I'm going to tie a little bit of missing 411 in here. There are a few cases that are completely inexplicable. Now, like, whenever
David Paulides actually has quite a few cases in his files about that could be interpreted as Dogman cases, and most of them have to do with mutilations by dogs, people getting mauled and attacked, and it generally what'll happen is it's a story of usually children or old women, oddly enough, that get attacked by these big dogs. It's odd that there's a common through line.
Fair. I know, like, well, a lot of pack animals and a lot of predatory animals like to conserve their energy and go after the elderly or the children. Like, polar bears up in Alaska do that a lot. A lot. Especially lately now that their habitat's going south. Like, it's not as uncommon as you might think, But I would also say if you're a hungry animal and you've got options on the table, I would go with the one that gives me the most net energy. I think that would make sense.
Mm-hmm. There are two episodes of Dogman Encounters Radio where someone comes on and specifically brings out a bunch of hand-selected missing 411 cases, where he talks about people who have been mauled by dogs, and usually in these cases, like communities would rally together and get a posse and take these animals out. Um, and I could only listen to a little bit of the first episode just because. Listen, man, I'm somebody who has a big appetite for the unknown, and that there is kind of the allure of the unknown and maybe a little bit of allure of the sense of danger to it. Not necessarily saying that, oh, well, I want to go run into the woods and get jumped on by a dogman, but, the idea that there's a big pissed off, animal that attacks people that, is undocumented has that kind of strangeness to it that wants you to want to learn more. But it was just all these stories about little kids being killed, old ladies being mutilated in their homes. And I remember I had to turn this episode off halfway through because it just made me sick to my stomach. And I'm saying this as somebody who, grew up in a police household and familiar with, like, murder cases and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff I have a stomach for, but there's something about these specific stories that I just find deeply upsetting.
No, it's wild. Like, whenever you, like, hear about you see, like, those werewolf movies and what they do to humans, it's nuts. And,
well,
like,
but that, it's like a fictional movie, and it's like, oh, no, the werewolf got him, you're kind of having fun with it. It's like, oh, man, look how ridiculous this is.
In real life.
Yeah, and then it happens in real life, and it's, you don't have that. It's not fun anymore. It's not. No. It's all fun and games until, children get gobbled up in their yards and in their backyard, and, their parents find their remains. Like, it's. Now, listen, I'm not saying that these missing 411 cases are dogmen. They are reported as large feral dogs or wolves. They're on the show because they could be interpreted as dogman cases, not necessarily because they are, right? But circling back to the fact that I only know of one encounter, literally one encounter, where somebody was physically hurt by one of these things and got away. It makes me wonder: do these things kill people?
I think, honestly, of Bigfoot and Dogman have the almost unique capabilities of if they want to take you out and you're out in the woods and you're not around somebody, even if you are and the other person's kind of not paying attention, I think both of these things would have the capability of taking you out without somebody knowing. And it mostly has to do with the human-like hands. Like,
there's one phrase that comes up often on the show I listen to, and it's, if it wanted to get you, it would have. And that...
Right. Both of those creatures, I think, express that quality. Like, and if both of those things are way out in the woods in these national parks and wherever the hell, I think that... I'm not saying all the people that disappear get attacked even by wild animals, let alone cryptids. Mm-hmm. But if you just disappear without a trace and shit, these things are definitely capable of making that happen.
One thing that's really common in areas that have a lot of dogman sightings is the animal mutilations. Especially on farms and that's such. Animals like
bit of a side note.
Deer and livestock partially eaten, specific organs removed, and then after that is all the usual traces of scavenging from other animals. And anytime I've heard stories of people finding animal mutilations in dogman territory, they are there's always body parts strewn around Stuff like that. Mother unit is texting me.
Can I just say on a side note to kind of maybe bring this into context a little bit? Like there are predatory species on this planet that have man eaters, like lions, tigers.
Yeah, lions of
bears.
Savo, really famous case.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that I don't think a lot of people out in the Western civilization really know is that there are tigers in India up until like less than 100 years ago that just go on massive sprees. Like there's one part of India that had 300,000 people lose their lives to tigers. And it's because they either sustain injuries or they get old, they have a hard time eating, or they're low energy. And then these animals realize that humans pose less of a threat to them because they're just farmer people that aren't looking for a tiger trying to eat them. And then they at least get them enough food for the next day. So, like, then you start having, like, the lions of Savo going on, where these big lions that are, like, old and have, like, issues with their teeth are eating people all the time because it's easy. You know, so, like I said, you get enough people hiking alone out in the woods, and these things are out here looking at all the different things they would have to hunt, and they see you out there, and they're looking on all these deer they're going to have to run down, you know what I mean? And then they see you, and all they got to do is be sneaky, you know what I mean? I'm thinking, if I was a predator and I had the two options, it would be a pretty easy choice, what I would prefer to look for.
And you know,
if you are a
this is the
successful
perfect
hunt,
time. This is the perfect time to pivot into the other well-known one, although this is one that we're all collectively skeptical about, and we have talked about collectively before when I've brought up the topic of Dogman. And it's one to this day that I think is only folklore. Compared to Beast of Prey Road, which is actually a flap of actual sightings, there's tons of evidence about it, there's the literal file at the local police department about it. Anytime I've ever researched this topic, I've only ever been able to come back to this one retelling. And anytime new information allegedly comes out, it gets taken down pretty quickly. Now, some people will point at that and say, well, they're trying to keep it covered up. But as a researcher, personally, I believe that means whoever released that information realized it was fraudulent and took it down to save face.
Which happens a lot in the cryptozoology community.
It does, and it's unfortunate and stupid that it does, but I would rather people, at least try to maintain some kind of integrity than just let all this disinformation fly around. So, we need to talk about Kentucky, in Jaster's backyard. There is a national park known as Land Between the Lakes, and we've actually brought up this location before. I believe it came up in our Bigfoot iceberg, if I remember right.
Yep, because there are Bigfoot encounters out in that area.
It's a very strange piece of land because it's one of the only geographic areas I know of that has squatches and dogmen habitating it. Now they're not cohabitating because, interestingly, there is a split in this park that is a natural line of demarcation between these two territories that they roam in, and I'm absolutely fascinated by it. But to this date, there are tons of sightings of both Squatch and Dogman coming out of this area, and it's really strange. So, Land Between the Lakes, just for a refresher, is a national recreation area in Kentucky and Tennessee. It's called that because the land that makes it up is between Lake Barkley and Kentucky Lake. It was designated as the recreation area in 1963 by JFK and has been developed using funds appropriated during the Johnson administration. The Tennessee Valley Authority originally managed it because they had constructed dams there to form these lakes. It used to be a community. There were about 60 or 70 families living there before it got turned into a national park. It's an area of land with a very interesting history, even if you're not looking into it as, from a cryptid perspective. There's a lot of interesting local history to read about. Really fascinating place. Now, the park itself has this road that goes through the middle of it, and it splits the park in half. And this is Highway 68. The southern part of it is generally where all the Sasquatch encounters are at. and it's the northern part of it where all the Dogman encounters are at. And this is also allegedly where the story takes place, in the northern part of the park. So, to kind of just give a brief summary of it, allegedly a family of 4 was brutally massacred in their RV by a Dogman, and police and local investigators and police and feds and park staff and all that found it, and they had to do this big cover-up and all that stuff. And the reason why I'm skeptical about this is that, okay, regardless of whatever official attempts at disinformation there are, we would have found some kind of mention of a family of this size going missing in the park at some point in newspapers or anything like that. We would have, there would still be some trace evidence of this incident happening, regardless of whether or not somebody wanted it to exist. That's just the nature of information. And yet, no matter how much I look, no matter how much I research, it all comes back to this one blog post. And even though I know the story has existed before that, because people have talked about it since long before this blog post was made, I can't find any other places where this story exists. And it continues to befuddle me. So at some point, this story entered into the lexicon of Dogman folklore, and this one blog has preserved it. It's the only one that's still got it up. I don't know.
Now, there is a telling of it on the cryptid wiki, like one of those sites that likes to compile like a lot of different cryptids all in one.
I don't trust that website because
like
it's a wiki. Anybody can edit a wiki.
No, true, but what I'm saying is, it's like it at least exists in some places. Like the story is at least still out there, at least the telling of it, and that's kind of where I got the general idea. That's where I heard about it. You know what I mean? Because, like, I think I remember in a episode on a podcast somewhere where they said they had these photos sent to them about this attack that happened back in the 80s, and then nothing came out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I think similar things happened where it was like they sat there, they looked at it, and they're like, oh, well, this is fraudulent in one way or another. However, I will say, like, it does seem, at least to me, that because of there being more Bigfoot research organizations in that area, that at least one half of this equation has some weight to it. Now, what I would say, too, is that, say you were in the border area, right? You're camping along the creek, or the river, right? And a Bigfoot or a Dogman entered either into the brushes in the middle of the night and didn't really show themselves too well, but they made noise and shit, or they were in the river making noise or throwing shit or whatever. I think I would have a hard time discerning the two things unless they made an obvious distinctive action or showed themselves or made a call that was distinct to the species. But if they're just sitting there huffing because they're out of breath because they're launching shit at you or working around in the bushes or breaking trees or something 50 yards away from you in the woods at night, I think I would have a hard time discerning the two things, especially if I was in that layover area where either species could be in. And, like, I think a lot of times people that would have this encounter with a Dogman would probably be like, oh shit, I know they think I'm gonna be in the loony bin, bro. You know what I mean? They're gonna put me in there because it sounds like I got attacked by something that's in the freaking, like, what, Underworld movies? What's that? Or, like, what was that werewolf and fucking vampire movie series? Happened in the 2000s.
Twilight?
No, it was the other one. It
No,
was the action.
Underworld.
Underworld. Yeah, that was the werewolves.
There's like some
versus
shit
vampire.
like that's going on. You know what I mean? That's not good. You know, like, what I want to see, if whenever these things come out, if we could get a approximate date, and like a date to actually like verify, like the moon. I wonder how much of this happens during a full moon. That'd be kind of neat
So
to see.
here's what I have to say. We'll put a pin in this, and we'll call this our first part, and then we'll talk about Land Between Lakes more in our next part, because this is an extensive story, and there's a lot of details about it that bother me, and having 2 episodes in the can is better than 1.
I understand.
Also, Also, Devin gets pissed at us when he has to edit anything that's longer than like an hour 10. So
No, I would be.
I'm doing this for Devin.
Right, we gotta help him out. So, with that, everybody, we'd like to thank y'all for staying with us and listening to this latest episode of KoR After Hours. Now, with that, I'd like to, again, shout out to Squatchable. If you like paranormal or cryptid activities, you want to listen to more Bigfoot stuff, go ahead and give them a shout out. They gave us a shout out now. So, if you like what you hear and you want to look at more of us, we do have a YouTube channel. We do have a Twitter, X, whatever. I'm just going to keep calling it Twitter. No one's going to call it X, right? I think we're past that. And then we also got Twitch for you, and we got links for you that are going to be in the description. So, with that, we'd like to thank everybody for coming on by tonight. Thank you all, and y'all have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.